All right, we are back with another episode of Summer Showcase Northern Lights, covering one of the best leagues in the world for, in my opinion, I guess I should say, the CFL, of course. So we are going to discuss quite a few topics tonight. A couple things on the docket, just so everybody's aware, is Winnipeg's 0-2, Saskatchewan's 2-0. We've got the potential of maybe Trey Ford. Maybe he should be moved. Maybe he should stay. And then also, we're going to do a little bit of a breakdown on Winnipeg's roster. But before we get into all that, Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good, my man. Doing good. Can't complain. Excited to get into some CFL and discuss, like you said, one of the best leagues in the world. So, that's what this is about.
Definitely agree, and hopefully it turns into an interesting discussion. I mean, obviously the topics tonight are quite interesting, but before we get into all of the main topics tonight, we're obviously going to do a quick preview or review of last week's game. And when I say quick, I mean real quick. So I'm going to just go ahead and bring up all the scores. We'll run down them real quick. We're not going to really spend a whole lot of time breaking down last week. I would imagine everybody who's watching right now caught most of the games. But here are the scores for last week. We've got the Thursday night game, Montreal at Winnipeg, 27-12. This is not the right week. Hold on just a sec.
I was to say, that is not the right week. That was week 1. Nope. There you go. Week 2's right there.
There we go. Yeah, 23-19. Winnipeg loses to Ottawa. Friday night, we've got Montreal versus Edmonton. And actually, that turned into a much closer game than I expected, which we can talk a little bit about that. Calgary falls to BC. I was kind of surprised by that after Jake Meyer's performance in week 1. And then Saskatchewan stays undefeated, wins over Hamilton 33-30. Hamilton is kind of an interesting team to watch this year. It seems like they're moving the ball with as good as anybody, but they just cannot score enough points to win a game for whatever reason. But any quick thoughts on these games before we kind of get into the topic for tonight?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, BC beating Calgary, I kind of expected it. Even though Jake Mayer, still played fairly well, BC's just got a lot of firepower, in that game. Edmonton kept the game close against Montreal, which was a little surprising. And then this Saskatchewan team, I think in Hamilton, right now, it's a tale of two separate teams. You're seeing a gritty, grind-out style with Saskatchewan. They don't really care if they're behind. They're going to make second-half adjustments. Corey Mace is doing a fantastic job as a head coach. And then, Hamilton on the flip side of it, Bo Levi Mitchell is off to probably one of the hottest starts I think we've ever seen. But they can't seem to put together a game for 4 quarters. They lost to Calgary in a close one week 1, even though they performed them on offense across the board. And just late mistakes, man. It's just a little too much, Interception by Bo Levi Mitchell, I think it was in the second half, that stalled the drive. And Saskatchewan just, I don't know, man. This team is, a lot of people aren't talking about them, but if they can continue just to improve and eventually get to the point where they don't have to come from behind and they can actually just get ahead, that defense may be good enough that it might be the first team to 20 in most of their games wins, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. And I mean, it seems like their defense is playing up to the task most of this year so far. But let's go ahead and just start right there. I mean, Saskatchewan, I had a feeling they were going to be good this season, but I didn't think that they would open the season 2-0. I thought they would eventually, find their way. I thought they would start slow, lose a couple games up front, and then kind of create momentum as they went on and as Corey Mace kind of got used to being a head coach. But like you said, he's done a tremendous job making, second half adjustments and sticking with the game plan when it ultimately matters the most. And here we are with them 2-0. And just to throw out a couple numbers here for people who are watching right now. I mean, Trevor Harris playing really great football right now, 71.1% completion rate. He's one of the top passers in the league in that category, leads the league in passing yards, leads the league in passing touchdowns, has only thrown 2 interceptions so far, And that's considering the fact that AJ Ouellette has been, really not performing up to the par so far this season. I mean, he's had 2.2 yards per carry. And I know some of that is obviously because, teams are game planning against him. But, at the same time, Trevor Harris is taking advantage of those situations. And realistically, that's what you want to do in this situation like this. So a couple of receivers have really stuck out. Jareth Stern, Sean Bain, Keon Schaefer-Baker, all of them over 100 yards. And a couple of these guys have more than one touchdown apiece. CJ Avery leads the league in interceptions. Defense has also forced 3 fumbles. And then their kicking game has been unbelievable. 11 of 11 total attempts so far. Mario Alford, 8th in punt return average, 5th in kick return average, 4th in kick return yards. 3rd in average, 5th in kick return attempts. Leads the league in punts, punt yards, and 2nd in average. Just unbelievable situational football, and realistically just an overall very complete team wins by this team. They're not winning by a lot of points, but it seems like they're doing the plays, or they're making the big plays when they matter the most and winning the game, which is ultimately what matters. But ultimately it's been very, very encouraging for first-time head coach. Has anything in particular about this team stuck out to you other than what you spoke about in the second half adjustments?
Well, I mean, primarily overall through the 2 games with Saskatchewan, I think that there's 2 trends that are really formulating here. First and foremost, it's not sustainable. Like, that's the biggest one. Speaking on those adjustments, they have to figure a way to get this run game going, because right now, despite AJ Ouellette being effective enough to be able to draw the defenses, they've played from behind in both games. Edmonton, they were down 21-9, I believe, and then in this game against Hamilton, they were down for a good chunk of this game. So they're throwing insane amount of, it's a very one-dimensional offense, which is crazy. And I know that the CFL can get away with it a little bit more because of the different dynamics and the motions and all that stuff, and it's only 3 downs, but not having a run game is eventually going to be teams just playing a 4-man front and being able to get pressure on Ouellette. So they have to find a way to get this run game going. And I think if that happens, you're talking about scores being 33-30, now being 33-10, or 33-13, because you're keeping the defense on the field for longer periods of time. And I think that that's one of the things that Saskatchewan needs to work on. Maybe they get more from the short passing game. Keon Schaefer-Baker is one of the he's one of the highlights of this season so far. Him and Sean Bain are a great 1-2 punch, and then you throw in, Jareth Stearns in the process, and it's like this wide receiving core is beyond talented, and they've been able to carry it through 2 games. But like you said, it's 11 points for the first, for the first 2 weeks. And realistically speaking, if you want to get really real, Sam, it's actually 4 points, because they were up 22-21 against Edmonton, and they got a late turnover and just happened to have a play that broke into the end zone at the end of that game. So it's really a 4-point victory throughout the 2 games for Saskatchewan. So that's the first one that sticks out to me. That's probably the only critique and criticism I have. Other than that, this defense is for real, and this is, I think, is where I really didn't expect it. Because they just are creating turnovers and putting Trevor Harris in a great field position. That 71.1% completion percentage probably wouldn't be as high as if he didn't have such good field position, right? Because you're throwing less and completing probably more passes in that situation. So even though there's a lot of that going on, and they are throwing a ton overall throughout the course of the game, this defense has really put themselves in good situations to be able to score and stay in this game. And the turnovers, I would be very interested if you were able to determine what the splits were when those turnovers came. But I bet you a lot of those turnovers would be in second half football.
I would have to agree. I mean, if you look at the points scored in this game, in the 3rd and 4th quarter alone, Saskatchewan scored 26 of their 33 points. They outscored Hamilton 26-10 in the 3rd and 4th quarters. If you look at week 1, very, very, very similar results when they outscored Edmonton 22-10 in the second half as well. In fact, so far this season, they've actually scored 37 points in the fourth quarter alone in 2 games. That is unbelievable. So I'm willing to bet that, if we sat here and looked through, you're probably exactly right. I would imagine most of those turnovers are coming in the second half of games. And again, I did not watch all of this last Saskatchewan game, although I'm going to start paying closer attention to them now because they definitely are shocking me a little bit with how well they're performing. And it'll be interesting to see if they can keep it up. Like we said, realistically, they've won the past 2 games by 4 points, with a garbage time touchdown coming against them or coming for them in week 1.
Week one. Week 1 against Edmonton, yeah.
So it's definitely interesting to see at the very least. So hopefully they can sustain, because I'd like to see Corey Mace have some success as a first-time head coach. I think the CFL tends to have a lot of one-and-done coaches, and I would like to see that not happen to Corey Mace, because I think he's a really good coach. He's risen through the ranks really quickly, and I would like to see another long-time head coach really have a good start to his coaching career.
I'll even go on record here right now and do a hot take too. If they can figure out this run game, I think Saskatchewan has a championship caliber team.
I would agree. And I think we talked about this last episode, actually, and I'll go ahead and rehash it once again. If I'm not mistaken, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Corey Mace has won a Grey Cup as a player, as a position coach, as a coordinator. Now he's a head coach. This is his first time as a head coach. It took a couple years in each spot before he won that Grey Cup, but maybe fast start was enough to give him the cushion that he needed. Gets that a top seed in his conference. Things could fall his way really quickly. And speaking of falling his way really quickly, I mean, if they're going to have a bid at remaining undefeated into week 4, they're playing Hamilton again, but this time they're at home. So, that's a pretty good start to the week 3 slate of games. And then moving forward, if they're able to win again against Hamilton, they're setting themselves up in really good position, moving forward in the league and in the playoff picture, which I know is way off still, but definitely interesting to see so far.
Well, one of the other things that you see with this team too, if you're watching it, is they believe in Corey Mace. The players have bought into it, and it's early. It's early, and the fact that they've bought into it and they're playing the way that they're playing. He's the first one on the sideline greeting the players when there's a big play made. He's the first one on the sideline, congratulating a player. He's the first one on the sideline critiquing a player that may have had an issue or a drop or, something along those lines. He's involved with what is happening, and that is something that is going to help these players want to continue to play for him at the high caliber. The other thing that this does is these 2 close victories like this builds confidence. It's going to build chemistry. It's going to continue to build with this team as it continues to grow. And that could be dangerous for the league if they can figure this run game out and they can avoid any major injury bugs. Because like you said, 71.1% of completions of completion percentage for Trevor Harris, that's not easy to do no matter what the field position is that I said. Yes, it's probably inflated a little bit based upon what we saw with the short field, but overall, you're talking a situation with Saskatchewan that this team is only going to get better. And when you take a look at the receivers and the numbers that they have put up already, that really is a dangerous combination for anybody as long as they can stay healthy. So keep an eye on them, man. This game against Hamilton next week, I will almost, without tipping my hand too much, I will almost bet it's not as close as this last one was.
I'm willing to bet on that as well. And to back up what you just said, Jarrett Stearns, 13 receptions, 193 yards. Sean Bain, 9 receptions, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. Huge performance last week. Keon Schaefer-Baker, 11 receptions, 161 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, this receiver group is extremely talented. They're producing extremely quickly this season. And, that bodes well for the long term if they can keep this up and continue to figure out that run game like we were discussing. Because realistically, that's the one part of this offense so far that's kind of been a letdown. I really thought that AJ Ouellette coming in there was going to bring a dynamic part of this offense that Saskatchewan really didn't have in the past. So it'll be interesting to see if they get that figured out and really what this offense can look like if they're clicking on all cylinders.
Well, and that's the other dangerous thing is week 1 it was Sean Bain, week 2 it's Keon Schaefer-Baker.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're talking about it, and then you look at Jared Stearns through 2 games has just been the steady, reliable guy. So you're getting to a point now already early that this team is scoring without it being one-dimensional, even though it is one-dimensional, which is really weird to say. Through the air, because it's not only one person producing, it's multiple people, despite the running game struggles. So if they can get AJ Ouellette going and he can start going off and becoming that next source, I mean, you're talking 4 options right there alone on a team that has Trevor Harris throwing the ball. I mean, Trevor Harris has been one of the most steady and reliable and top end quarterbacks in this league for a while when he's healthy. It's just health has always been his biggest issue, and if he can stay healthy, it's like Bo Levi Mitchell. He's a lot more dangerous than I think people realize.
Oh, I would agree. A couple of years ago, in fact, he was really realistically the best quarterback in recent memory for the Redblacks. And ever since he left, we've struggled to find a guy to even really live up to what he can do. And it's always kind of funny in my mind to see those situations where a quarterback is kind of shoot out the door like, oh, we can find somebody better. Don't worry about it. And next thing you know, it's 4 or 5 years before they find somebody who's even, worth a damn to put under center again. So, shout out to Trevor Harris who keeps doing it. I think he's 35 years old this season, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken. He might be older than that. But either way, I mean, just continues to be able to do it, late in his career. So interesting to see that as well. And hopefully he can keep it up, because it would be awesome to see him, really get some MOP progress at this age. But moving on to the next subject at hand, I know I touched on it a little bit ago. Trey Ford. Obviously, we've talked about him before, and I don't want to spend too much time on him this season because obviously right now he hasn't even played. He hasn't, he has not come off the bench to my knowledge in 2 games so far. It's been McLeod Bethel-Thompson and Dakota Prukup leading the show there for Edmonton. Bethel-Thompson's playing okay, realistically playing pretty well, made a couple bonehead decisions that led to interceptions, but, that's pretty par for the course for MBT. And then Dakota Prukup, 8 carries, 14 yards, couple touchdowns. Hasn't really gotten an attempt in the passing game. Don't really expect him to be much of a passing threat this season. But Trey Ford, in his starts over 2 seasons, has a 65.2% completion rate, 297 pass attempts, little over 2,500 passing yards. He's run for, 771 yards on top of that, had 14 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. So decent numbers, not amazingly great when you're looking at McLeod Bethel-Thompson, and he's got a 72% completion rate. But if you're Edmonton, what do you do with this quarterback situation? Do you keep Trey Ford, given that, you've got 2 guys that are 30 plus years old leading the way, or do you ship him out and try to get something that can aid your team right away, given that you're 0-2 to start a season once again?
Well, the thing with Edmonton is it's very tricky. I think without McLeod Bethel-Thompson, these scores are a lot tougher through the first 2 weeks. Like, Saskatchewan was close. This game against Montreal was probably a lot closer than we all expected. But I think a lot of that's MBT's experience and being able to sustain drives in key moments and eventually put points on the score, put points on the board. Now, to answer your question about Trey Ford, he's this is a tricky situation, right? Like, we all assume that Chris Jones just doesn't like him, and that's the reason why we're not getting in there. Then I hear, at least me personally, talking to some people about the CFL side of things, that he's not prepared. He can't read defenses. He's not studying the way that other quarterbacks are. And then you take a look at his passing overall; those numbers are dreadful. Like, I'm sorry, over the course, I mean, I don't know how many starts you said he had, but um, those are not good numbers to turn around and be like, yes, this guy is a starting caliber quarterback in this league that can lead to a championship, right? But we all see everything else that comes with it: the intangibles, the athleticism. You can see that he has rushing ability, obviously, with 85 carries for 771, but a 14-11 touchdown to INT ratio, right? So, what are you really going to get? That's the key point. Are you really truly going to get a piece that's going to be able to slot in immediately and help your team, right? Or is it going to be the other 8 teams looking at you going, so what is it about Trey Ford? Are we really going to go ahead and give you a piece that's going to be sustainable for you guys? And we get a quarterback that may never read a defense correctly in his entire career? You know what I mean? So, like, it's kind of a rock and a hard place for Edmonton. It's either cut him and potentially let him loose for a team to pick him up, and then he goes wild on you because of his pure raw athleticism, or you make a trade or try to make a trade, but you're getting back less than what you probably want for a guy with upside. So that's the tricky part, because you can't go based off of statistics, because it's not enough, to go off of, because it's still a small sample size in the grand scheme of what CFL quarterbacks put up, but and it's not impressive enough within those small starts to be like, yeah, let's go give you guys like a linebacker that might be able to put pressure on a QB that will help with your sack numbers, right? So that's kind of where we are with Trey Ford. I would love to see him out of Edmonton. I'd love to see him get a chance out of Edmonton. It's just where, right? That's the biggest key, is where can he go that will give him an opportunity and chance to not only start but also become a better passer. Because let's face it, you can run in this game at the CFL level, but if you can't throw the ball at a high level, you're probably never going to become a true starter for longer than a few games.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, when you look across the league, which teams do you see having any sort of need for a long-term developmental project like Trey Ford, somebody with high upside, but, realistically a pretty low floor?
Well, see, it's hard with the CFL because the CFL has shorter contracts, right? Like, you're not talking locking guys in for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You're talking, 2, maybe 3 years tops, depending on what team wants to do it. But you take a look at a team like Edmonton, you would have said Edmonton was a perfect spot. They go and get McLeod Bethel Thompson out of retirement and say, "Hey, come play for us," So he comes back, and next thing you know, Trey Ford's now back down on the depth chart. Um, and last year, with all the injuries that took place, you're looking at it going, okay, they're starting this guy, they're starting that guy. They signed, Jarrett Dagey. Here you go, Dagey gets in, and now what's happening with Trey Ford, right? So you wouldn't normally have thought Edmonton as a primary spot there. And then you're like, oh, okay, Trey Ford could be the short distance guy. Dakota Brewcop, come on down, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic. Long term, it's hard to really give you. Short term, he's going to have to wait for an injury. As much as I hate to say that about quarterbacks, is obviously we don't want anybody to be hurt. But any of the teams that do have older quarterbacks that may or may not return in the near future, so like maybe Saskatchewan, maybe they can develop behind Trevor Harris for a little bit, who has injury issues, or even maybe Ottawa. Like Drew Brown looked good in his first one, but let's be honest, Jeremiah Masoli is made of glass. So maybe you can bring Trey Ford in to kind of develop him. He can learn from Jeremiah Masoli, because let's face it, Jeremiah Masoli still has a lot of talent and a lot of knowledge to be able to instill on somebody. And he can kind of watch Drew Brown. I mean, Drew Brown's probably the future, but it may be a Bo Levi Mitchell, Jake Mayer situation in the future. That's a possibility. If Mayer regresses as the season goes on, Calgary would probably be a prime spot. I probably would have said Calgary before the season, but seeing how Mayer's played so far, I can't really take Mayer out of that equation. So it's a little harder and trickier at the CFL level. It's kind of like the ELF. Like, I know there's a lot of short-term contracts, and a lot of those situations, like your leash is much, much smaller. But it's one or two things. It's either you bring him in with a young guy to compete, or you put him behind an older gentleman and have him go, you know, maybe sit behind him for a year or two and then hope everything works out. That's really, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's a multi-layered question. It's like an onion on that one.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, I like that you mentioned Calgary. That was one of my first thoughts when I was really thinking about this. But then, like you said, Jake Mayer's played pretty good. He's fairly young. Do you really need another guy there that's young? I mean, you've got Matt Schiltz there, who's kind of a veteran backup, but not too old. He's probably not going anywhere immediately. Tommy Stevens, great rushing threat, not really a passing threat. He's not going to be going anywhere in terms of, being your starter or anything like that. So it definitely makes sense for Calgary to bring in a guy that's, a long-term option if you don't believe in, Jake Mayer. But it looks like at this point, at least, that they do. Let me pose another team to you that you did not mention, and that would be this one, Toronto. Chad Kelly's on suspension. He's also already nearing 30 years old. They're at 30 years old already. Brian Scott's there's your quarterback 3. He's 28 years old. He's still very young. Cameron Duke's still very young. Nick Arbuckle, not a big fan. I know he's had success with Ryan Dinwiddie in the past, but I'm not really sure that he's the guy that you really want there as a backup. I mean, what about, Toronto making a trade for Trey Ford?
No. Not with the way Cameron Duke's played in week 1. I hate to just use one game as a staple for stuff, but Cameron Dukes feels like he is capable to hold this team over for Chad Kelly, and 30 years old is not old for a quarterback nowadays. So it's not really a dire need. Like, you're a little bit harsher on Nick Arbuckle than I am. I don't mind Nick Arbuckle as much. So I think that him backing up Cameron Dukes is good because he has had opportunity and chances. He's had some success in this league, so he's shown that he can, do it when called upon. And I think that's good for Cameron to have behind him. And Chad Kelly will be back after week 9. And the biggest dilemma for this team will be, okay, if we're, 8-1 in that time frame, or whatever 7-1 in that time frame, do we pull Dukes and start Chad Kelly, right? Like, that's going to become the biggest issue. But that's still a little ways away. So at this point in time, and they're not even worried about it. I just think they're going to stick with Cameron Dukes and just let him run with it, because he was with this offense last year too. So it's not like, or this team last year. So it's not like it's he's coming over from the indoor league from like Duke City or Tucson, or and jumping and trying to jump right into being a starter because their quarterback room was thin. It was just they just let him sit for a year and learn.
Yeah, and in their defense, he had actually started, I believe, 2 games last year, or at least played the vast majority of 2 games last year. I know he had at least one start. It's kind of a weird situation mid-season where he started a game because they didn't want to play Chad Kelly because they were in good position. Don't recall the exact details there. But ultimately, there's one other team I wanted to suggest, and this one makes a little bit more sense to me, although they did bring in a younger quarterback this offseason, and that is Winnipeg. Winnipeg has Zach Claros there. He's 35 years old. He's been a great quarterback for many years, but he's definitely not playing up to snuff this year. Not saying Trey Ford could come in and replace him immediately, but that's definitely a good teacher to learn from. Mm-hmm. And then behind him, he's got Chris Streveler, a great third down option, a guy who's been in the NFL very recently, who also could instill some veteran knowledge on Trey Ford. He's 29 years old, but then they've also got Terry Wilson there. There's very promising mobile guy. Hasn't really gotten a shot at the professional level quite yet, but he's also 26 years old, still very young, could pan out to be, a long-term option there for Toronto or Winnipeg. What are your thoughts on that team?
Winnipeg, I would say, probably makes a little more sense than Toronto does. I still feel like it's not a lovely situation to come into because the Terry Wilson signing kind of reminds me a little bit of it being possible, them kind of grooming him and training him and teaching him to become the starter of that sense. Like you bring back Shrevler to be like, hey, here's some knowledge on what this game is. You bring in Wilson, who showed promise at the at the USFL level. Promise. I mean, it wasn't pretty by any means, but there was some hope there. And then you have Collaros, who's been around for so long, and honestly, Collaros has knock on wood, avoided major injury bugs for the last few years. So that's been nice to see with Winnipeg being a staple in that front. But he is 35, so he is starting to get up there in age a little bit. It would be interesting to see how they would do it because developing quarterbacks is always tough. Like the NFL has a huge problem with developing quarterbacks. Like I think anybody with half a brain would sit there and tell you that. And I can't imagine that these leagues with shorter contracts, are any better at developing quarterbacks over time. I think it's just a matter of a guy wanting to be up there and re-signing constantly and having some stability at the coaching position, right? But Winnipeg would probably make the most sense just because of what's behind Collaros. It's just, does anybody on that coaching staff have faith in Trey Ford, right? That's the key question.
Agreed. I mean, there's definitely a large question there for what the future holds for Trey Ford. I mean, will he ever pan out in Edmonton? Do they hold on to him? Do they eventually let go of him? A big question mark right now for a top overall pick just a couple seasons ago that really is a dynamic talent that is truly generational as a quarterback. And realistically, even if he doesn't pan out as a quarterback, with his speed, his agility, you could move him to a number of other positions, and I'm sure he would be able to perform. Wide receiver, running back, perhaps. Wouldn't put it past him at all. And he's still young, so there's still a long time for us to figure it out. But
for sure.
I like what you said about Terry Wilson. I think that actually is going to be, he has a real chance to develop into that long-term option for them. I mentioned that he's only 26 years old. Despite that, he's in his third professional season. So this isn't, new to him by any stretch. He understands how to be a pro. He got a lot of experience in college, started for 3 different teams in over 4 different seasons. Got a start with Houston last season. Did pretty well, 11 of 17, 138 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. He was dinking and dunking. It wasn't like he was, stretching the field or anything like that. But at the same time, he got a professional start under his belt. So there's definitely something to say about that. I mean, especially when, quarterbacks with starting experience are few and far between, especially ones that are willing to sign for a quarterback 3 job realistically.
Right.
But real quick before we move on, I wanted to touch on that. Terry Wilson was one of several USFL quarterbacks that have kind of carved out a role for themselves this season on these CFL rosters. We've got, Dakota Prukop, which I know was in the CFL first. He came back. He's with Edmonton this season, was with Winnipeg last season. You got Terry Wilson. You got Jack Cohn. Shea Patterson's back in the CFL. Brian Scott's in the CFL. It seems like there's just so many of these guys that are just littered throughout the league at this point.
That's part of the fallout of the merger. You lose 8 teams, and that's kind of what happens, and the CFL benefits from it. It's just more impressive to see the fact that these guys are sticking and they're staying on rosters more than it is necessarily that they're up there. It's a tough situation for Trey. He's young and has a chance to figure it out, but if the reports are true that he's just not prepared or preparing as if he is the starter, he will never be a starter. So, anybody with that mentality will tell you that you need to prepare as a starter, even if you're not. So, it's going to be how much is Trey Ford hungry for it when he gets a chance, and how much of it is it going to be that Edmonton was right?
Agreed. Well, let's go ahead and move on to a brief. We won't spend a whole lot of time on it because we're getting a little deep on some of these subjects here, but a brief overview of Winnipeg's roster this season. So I know we've talked quite a bit at length about the quarterback position, so we're not going to rehash that position. Last week, we were kind of discussing their running back position because they've got some injuries right there with Brady Oliveira being out. We also kind of talked about their wide receiver position. So let's go ahead and move on and talk about their offensive line so far this season. They are currently allowing a third most sacks in the league with 5. Their rushing yards has just been abysmal. They've only rushed for about 67 yards a game so far, and I know it's only 2 games into the season. But overall, it looks like Zach Collaros is really struggling due to the fact that he really doesn't have a run game to support him, and he really doesn't have very solid protection right now. I mean, you're our resident offensive line expert. What do you make of these struggles that Winnipeg has had up front that has kind of led to them starting 0-2 so far?
Well, I mean, when you're one of the best teams in the league for so long, you start getting ravaged of talent, right? Like, it's pretty much how that goes. And Winnipeg is starting to see the unfortunate consequences of that with this offensive line. Collaros is getting hit pretty often. He's under pressure frequently. There's no rhythm. And what makes it even worse is the only thing that can protect a bad offensive line in the pass game is usually a good run game, and they can't even do that right. So it's tough sledding for Winnipeg so far. And I don't know how much of that still is going to be. If I remember correctly, I heard the announcers in week 1 say there's 3 new offensive starting linemen on this team, I believe is what they said. So, yeah, I think it was 3. So you're talking offense is usually behind defense coming out of camp. So it's still going to take some time for this unit to mesh together. And that's ultimately what it's going to boil down to for these guys, right? Like, how much of this is going to be the improvement? And it also goes on the offensive line coaching, right? The O-line coach. How much can you change, or how much are you willing to change to kind of fit the talent that you have instead of trying to keep your system in place? So it's tough sledding through the first 2 weeks for Winnipeg. I don't even think they've cracked 20 points in either one of their games, which is insane to me. And it potentially could get worse if before it gets better. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not wrong. I mean, so far, not much of anything is going right for him. And again, I'm going to rattle off some numbers real quick. They have 4 top wide receivers. Only one of those guys has averaged over 9.9 yards per reception. And obviously, some of that is by design, given the protection issues they've had up front. Lowest point output of teams who have played 2 games. They've only put out 31 points total, scored 19 points this past week against Ottawa. The only team that's lower right now is Ottawa, who has only played 1 game. Least yards of average net offense at just under 297 yards a game. Third least rushing yards per game at 67. Second least passing yards total. Lowest second down conversion rate, which that's a big statistic right there that's really slowing this team down and preventing them from scoring points. Converting only 34.1% of their second down attempts so far. So that's definitely an issue they need to address going forward. It's never going to be sustainable at that point. Third lowest pass yards per attempt. Third most sacks allowed, as I mentioned before. Another big one, and this is direct result of their lowest second down conversion rate, and that's lowest time of possession. They've only held the ball for 26 minutes over 2 games. That's unbelievable when you think about 60 minutes per game, 120 minutes. They've had 26 minutes of time of possession. That's insanity to me. Tied for the most 30-plus yard pass plays allowed. 3 sacks, only 1 interception so far. They've allowed 25 points per game. Second most rushing yards allowed at 101 yards per game. And is tied for third most offensive touchdowns allowed as well with 5. There's a 4-way tie for third, so for whatever that's worth. But just incredible to see this from Winnipeg, considering if I had to pick a team that was going to fall off from the top of the league last year, it would have been Toronto. Toronto lost a lot of their big name talent, AJ Ouellette. They've got Chad Kelly on suspension, all these different guys. But they're winning, or they won week 1 at least. Winnipeg, on the other hand, is struggling. They've got most of their big name players back, and yet here we are. So kind of surprising to see. Really don't know what the overall issue is here. They've got a lot of talented players there. Is there anything that really sticks out to you as far as what could be causing all this other than the protection issues up front?
Yeah, I can tell you right now there's 2 things. And honestly, it's the offensive line that's the biggest thing. That's what you just touched on. We just discussed that because, drives can't be sustained. And I don't know if this is a direct correlation to the second part, but they're not getting pressure on the quarterback. Willie Jefferson and as a Jeff Coat on the other side, they're just not. It's not the same 2, like that we've seen in the past with these guys getting pressure. It feels like that the pressure that they are getting is usually on blitzes coming from the linebacker spot. It does not feel like this front 4 is very deep at stopping the run, and it's also not very deep at or very good at getting interior pressure either up the center. So I don't know if they're just undersized in the middle of the middle of this line, or if it's just like a little bit of like a gap between the technique and what the talent is. But there's something in the middle of this line that is gashing them and stopping them from being able to get pressure and tackles for loss. So this D line's probably been one of the biggest disappointments for me so far of the season.
That's definitely fair. I mean, that was one of my big points of contention as well. I know they've gotten 3 sacks, so it sounds not really that bad.
Coverage sacks.
Yeah,
I believe. Exactly. I'm pretty sure. I was gonna say. I'm pretty sure. Not to interrupt you, but I'm pretty sure 2 of them were coverage sacks.
I'm pretty sure you're right. And when you have a secondary that features guys like Tyrell Ford and Terrell Bonds, and it's probably going to happen more often than not, especially with the lack of penetration that they're getting up front anyway. But I mean, it's been interesting to watch. I mean, it really is just a colossal collapse by Winnipeg, and I ultimately think they'll get it figured out. But the question is when. That next week they've got BC, and granted they're at home, but I mean, what do they do in that game? They don't really have a very easy schedule coming up. They've got Calgary, but they're at Calgary. After that, they've got Ottawa again in Winnipeg, Calgary again in Winnipeg. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. They could, if they string together a couple more losses here, we might see the downfall of Winnipeg, going forward.
I think eventually they'll be able to turn it around a little bit. I think Kolaros is too good of a quarterback. I think this is still a really well-coached team. It's just going to be time to mesh. Like I said, I believe it's 3 offensive linemen and new offensive linemen, so they have to have time to kind of gel. And this defense needs to figure out a way to stay off the field, and a good offense will help with that. So eventually, if they can get this offense rolling, it should help. Augustine was a little inefficient last week, which was kind of a surprise. I expected him to be a little more efficient in Brady Oliveira's absence, and it just didn't really pan out that way in that game. So I think they'll turn it around. If it's definitely been a rocky start for sure.
Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, honestly, like I said, it's been surprising. I just expected, if we're playing football and it's CFL football, Winnipeg's going to be good because, that's everything I've known for the past, 5-10 years at this point. I think it was literally 10 years ago that they had their last losing season at this point. I mean, they're just unbelievable run they've had. But it is that time of the show to talk about predictions. We're going to go ahead and get into some of the betting odds for this week, and then we will give you our predictions, and then we'll tie a nice shiny red bow on this one and send you guys off to sleep for the night at 11:30 midnight. So, let's start with the Thursday game. Obviously, it's Ottawa at Montreal. Montreal is a 6.5-point favorite in this one. You've got a plus 230 Ottawa money line. You got a negative 280 Montreal money line, and then you got a 47.5 over under. So if this is you and you're throwing your money down on this game, which way are you going in this one, and which you taking over or under?
Honestly, I'm probably going to take Montreal and for them to cover the spread. I know 6.5 is a pretty big spread, but this team is legit. This defense is really good. I know Edmonton fought them hard, and I know Ottawa had a good win last week against Winnipeg. There's just something about this game that reeks of like a 10-point victory in Montreal's favor. To be honest with you, I would be very tempted to take the over. I'm not sure if I would cement to that, but I would lean probably 55-45 to the over in this situation. But this game feels like a 30-20 type game to me, 31-21-esque type game. So I'm going to roll with I'm going to roll with Montreal winning this game 31-21 over Ottawa.
All right. I am actually picking Ottawa again. I just have a feeling this team's different this year. They're very scrappy. This is a very big test very early in the season. If they can beat Montreal here, it is going to answer a lot of questions. If they lose to Montreal, it's going to reopen a bunch of questions that I thought may have been a little bit more solidified after week 1 when we beat Winnipeg. So I'm taking Ottawa, but if I have to really pick in this one, it's probably going to be like a 23-21 game, 24-21 game, very close, decided late in the game, probably on a last-minute score or last-minute defensive stop, on Montreal to prevent them from scoring. So, 24-21, I'm taking Ottawa. So obviously, Montreal's covering the spread or not covering the spread there. So obviously go with Ottawa and the points. And then the over under, I'm just under. So Ottawa and the under, I guess, for me. I really wasn't expecting that result on the under, but yeah, realistically, I don't see them scoring much over 24 points. And I really like this defense this year. They just seem like they're on another level. But moving on to the Friday game, we've got BC at Winnipeg. Winnipeg is a 2-point favorite at home, which I'm actually kind of surprised to see after the past 2 weeks. The over-under is 51.5. You've got a negative 135 money line for Winnipeg, a plus 115 money line for BC. So what's your prediction, and which way are you leaning on the betting?
I'm taking BC +2, and I'm taking the under in this game. Let's be honest. I don't know why Winnipeg's favored in this game. It seems really weird, and that over-under seems extremely high for a team that hasn't scored 20 points. I know BC is an electric offense, and they probably could score a chunk of that themselves, but them being favored, Winnipeg being favored, just I don't see how. Normally speaking, I say I can't pick against Winnipeg until they prove that they can't be picked, and I think that the first 2 weeks they proved that they can't be picked. So I'm taking BC in this game, which means Winnipeg will probably win, just so everybody's out there that's betting. But I'm taking the under in this one, though. I think BC wins. I'm going to say 24-42-12. 24-12. Sorry.
That's funny. I'm going to go BC in the under as well. I think BC is going to put up a lot of points, but Winnipeg's not going to hold their end of the bargain to get over to the over. I think this is going to be like a 31-16 game, and ultimately it's just going to be BC's game from the very beginning. I really don't see Winnipeg keeping up in this one. BC's put up a lot of points already this season, so I expect it to continue this week.
I did only pick 24 for BC primarily because I think Winnipeg's defense is still better than what has been shown, and BC's offense has looked really, really good, but they've also at times looked very shaky. So I think Winnipeg's defense finds a way to keep them in the game. It's just not, they just won't be able to finish it. That's all.
That's kind of funny because I'm actually looking at it a little bit the other way. I'm actually expecting BC to do a little bit better this week because of what I've seen so far out of Winnipeg's defense. If you can't get pressure on Vernon Adams, it's going to be a long day for that defense. So we'll see what happens. But I'm definitely right now, I just don't have a lot of faith in what Winnipeg is doing. And like you said, now that I'm betting against them, they'll probably prove me wrong. But that's okay. That's why we do this stuff, because it's kind of fun to look back on. But, ultimately, let's look at the Saturday game. And this one, I think, I have a feeling which way we're going to lean on both of these. But basically, it's Edmonton +6 versus Toronto in Toronto, who is a 6-point favorite in this game. It's -270 money line for Toronto, +220 for Edmonton, a 50-point over/under. So what's your prediction on this one, and what do you got in the betting?
I'm taking Edmonton with the points, and I'm taking the over. Toronto's going to win this game, but Edmonton has proven that they are tough through the first 2 weeks. I know it's been Saskatchewan, but the Montreal game showed a lot to me. Toronto still has Cameron Dukes only in his second start. This team did lose a good chunk of talent in the offseason, so it may not be as easy as a prediction as we think it is. If this was Chad Kelly, maybe a different story because of just the experience and the ability of what he did in the past. But I'm taking Edmonton +6. I think this game's going to be, it's going to be over 50. It's going to be like a 31-28, 31-28 affair. So I'm taking Edmonton +6 and the over.
And you said Toronto wins?
Toronto wins 31-28, yes.
Okay. I'm actually on the other side of the over/under. I'm going to go under on this one. I am also taking – oh, man. Man, this one's tough. 6 points is a lot, especially for how Edmonton has played so far this season. But
and that's primarily the main reason why I went there. It does feel like it could be a 2-score game. It does feel like it could be an 8-point game even. But
yeah.
I think it's going to be like a 3 or 4 point game at most, and that's why I settled on the score I settled on.
Man,
realistically speaking, I should have probably
done
31-27. It's probably what I should have done, but
I could still switch it. You want to go with 27?
31-27. I like that one better. 28's too round of a number.
That's fair. The CFL has way too many weird ways to add points to have that so around. But man, yeah, I think I'm gonna take Edmonton and the points. I'm going under. Man, let's say 24 to 20, and even then, I'm really not confident about Edmonton not scoring more points than that, to be honest with them. 24-20 Toronto, and man, it's so weird to say how we're pleasantly surprised by Edmonton's performance. So, I mean, despite the fact that they're 0-2, they play pretty well.
It's the opposite end of the Saskatchewan, right? Like it's haven't been able to finish games, haven't been able to keep the lead once they had the lead, whereas Saskatchewan's like always playing from behind. So it's like they never even have a lead until the end of the game. So Edmonton's on the flip side of that. Like they'll lead the whole game and then just can't finish. So call them the Washington Mystics of the CFL. That's how I pretty much explain everything nowadays.
Oh, I would just call it the Chris Jones effect. I mean,
I
feel
mean
like
that works too.
Of his
I'm
coaching.
already harsh enough on him. I didn't want to be even more harsh on him. So,
well, speaking of harsh on him, maybe we need to add a new segment and we'll call it the Chris Jones Award, and it'll be the Bonehead Coaching Decision of the Week.
Oh boy, I love it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's add it. Let's do it. I love it. The Chris Jones. What would you say? Bonehead Award. I like it.
Yeah, the Chris Jones Award, and we'll just the worst coaching decision of the week every week. Which we'll have to get down deep in that one if we're going to do it. But, with all the other indoor leagues and stuff shutting down, I definitely think I can spend a little bit more time focused on stuff like that. But the final game of the weekend, this one should be a really good game. It was decided by 3 points this past week. Hamilton at Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan, oddly enough, is only 2.5-point favorites after winning by 3 in Hamilton. That seems odd to me, but man,
I think it's because the way Bo Levi Mitchell's been playing. Like he's been playing really well, and I think that Hamilton is a team that they put up 30 points. It's not like they, it's not like it was like a 10-point. It wasn't. It's not like it was 12-10 or whatever. Last week. However, I think that this is going to be a little bit bigger of a victory for Saskatchewan. I think this team is gaining confidence. I'm taking Saskatchewan here, -2. I think they cover that. And I'm probably going to take the under. I think that it's 50. It's 63 combined last week. I'm going to take the over, actually. I think that I'll take the over on this one. I think they do enough just to get over that hump. I'm going to say 28-24 Saskatchewan.
All right. So Saskatchewan wins 28-24, and you're also taking the over. Yep. And Saskatchewan obviously covers with a 4-point victory there. So I don't understand why this point spread is so low. Like I said, they just beat them by 3 in their own house. So you can already see where I'm going with my decision here. You're definitely got to take Saskatchewan on this one. I just don't understand why you would bet against them at home when they just beat the same exact team, on the road. So I'm taking Saskatchewan. I think this is probably going to be like a 6-point victory. I don't expect it to be much over that. I think Hamilton's a really good team this season, and I think they will be a playoff team by the end of the year. But they definitely have to figure out a couple things with their team that they just haven't yet. Saskatchewan, on the other hand, seems to come through when they really need to, and that's the hallmark of a good team to me, and does not surprise me in the slightest, given the way Corey Mace has had success everywhere he's gone so far in his career. So, I assume the same is going to come the rest of the way for him this year. Like I said, I got Saskatchewan, definitely expecting the cover. I got a 6-point victory, so I think I'm going to do 30-24. So say take the over as well. Ultimately, maybe 54 points, so just barely over in this one. So ultimately, we've got all our bets down. We've got all our predictions down. We really want to thank everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We've had some pretty good solid numbers here so far, for considering this is only our 3rd episode so far.
Third. Yes, third. Sorry.
I was like, third. I know we've done at least 2, but
no, it's our 3rd. Yeah.
Couldn't remember if it was 3rd or 4th.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Join us every Wednesday night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be here every night to kind of finish out your night with some CFL talk. We'll be kind of keeping you up to date with everything going on. Kind of talking the games, the recent headlines, I guess you could say. Talk some injuries, transactions, all that fun stuff. As always, make sure you're tuning in and subscribing to our YouTube channel to make sure you're catching everything. There's a lot of stuff that goes out for us on YouTube only and does not go out on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, any of these other platforms. You might have caught our content, so make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. We're also trying to hit 1,500 subscribers by the end of July. Have a little bit over a month and a half to do so. We've been cruising pretty well recently, so make sure if you haven't done so already to hit that subscribe button. Michael, you've got a million different things in the works at all times. I know you've got Dynasty Academy tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. What else you got coming up?
So on Tuesdays I do a summer showcase. It's the original series of of all of this that's spun off of it. It is my co-host with me is Bryce Lego. He's Pylon Productions. We talk ELF action, which is the European League of Football. That is at 8 p.m. Probably 8:15. It's probably be safer. 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. And then on Wednesday, generally we have Summer Showcase Overtime, which is a discussion with the ELF, but that's more of the breaking news, injury updates. We do predictions as well in that one, but it's primarily focusing on the storylines coming out of the week. That's with quarterback Zach Bronkhorst, who is the starting quarterback for the Milano Seamen. That is usually at 6 p.m. Eastern. Today, we did not do that one. We had a massive summer heat wave come through here. It was knocking out power. We lost power for a little bit. When I got home from the ocean, it was like 101 in my apartment or whatever. So it was pretty warm. So we decided to cancel. And then obviously this show, Summer Showcase Northern Lights, 10:30 p.m. and then Dynasty Academy on Thursday. So yeah, that's what I got going on right now.
Basically, you can watch Michael on YouTube every night of the week. He takes Mondays, Sundays, and Saturdays off, basically. Although we might have another episode of Spring Football Reports coming. We'll see. We got to discuss that and see if we got one more left in us. We might be done for the season. I'll keep you guys updated on that. But as always, if you're a fan of any alternative football league, whether it's indoor, outdoor, overseas, in America, does not matter. We've probably got you covered. Got a couple leagues that we don't cover yet, but we'll figure out how to get them in there at some point. Definitely also really excited to announce that we've got Big 3 basketball being streamed here on Shady Sports Network on our YouTube channel going forward for the rest of the month of June, at least, hoping to get that to stick around for the long run. We also, if you're watching via Twitch, we might be having some MMA events coming up, but that is a Twitch-only thing, not my decision. That is per the organization we would be working with on that. They only want their events on Twitch, so definitely watch out for that as well. So bringing you every sort of content we can possibly get when it comes to sports, whether it's live sports, it's us breaking down games, or it's players coming on and talking about their careers. Essentially, we've got everything you could possibly want and more. And if we don't have it, let us know what you want to see, and we'll figure it out. I assure you.
I also wanted to say real quick that I am through the summer with hockey and the NBA dying down. I am into WNBA. I'm also into the National Women's Soccer League, and I'm also into the United Soccer League Championship. Divisions as well. I don't know the players as well as much. I've just started kind of dabbling with it. I got a little bit of a following on Blue, the Blue Sky for the National Women's Soccer League, just tweeting about or posting about that stuff. No shows in the works. I don't plan on doing any shows with that and stuff. But if you did want to talk anything along those lines and you're into it, or you like it, by all means, hit me up on social media and we can discuss it. So
definitely. And then also
and NASCAR.
Yeah, because you didn't list enough sports already. But no, if you're on Discord, also make sure you join in our server. We have constant conversations going on about multiple different sports, football, basketball, all these different sports that he just listed as well. As well as lacrosse and a couple other random things in there as well. You can also share your content if you're a content creator. So join us, help us grow an audience and then keep them entertained. But with all that, we'll catch you guys next week, Wednesday night, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, and we'll leave you with this, Jim.